Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to personally witness a supernatural fulfillment of Bible prophecy, stay tuned. Because my hair's been standing on end this weekend as I have watched the news emanating from Israel, and it's all merging together right now to fulfill the prophecy of Jesus. Now, I want to take time to read the prophecy, and then you're going to see not one or two, but 5, 6, or 8 different articles showed up in the Israeli press over the weekend dealing with the stage being set to fulfill the prophecy of Jesus. The prophecy is Matthew 24. In verse 15, here's what we read. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let me pause there. Judea is the West Bank. Judea is the area that Israel is contemplating giving to the Palestinians for their new Palestinian state. So Jesus said, when you see an event called the abomination of desolation, if you live in Judea, then you're going to need to flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Let me set the table here. The Bible prophesies a peace agreement between Palestinians and Israelis. When it's signed, the final 7 years to Armageddon will begin. One of the conditions of this treaty will be that Jews living in the new Palestinian state can either leave and be bought out, or if they insist, they can stay there living as a Jewish minority under a Palestinian government. Now, the 7 years, the peace agreement will start a 7-year period. 3.5 years into that 7-year period, Jesus prophesied at the time called the abomination of desolation, which the Bible specifically says happens halfway through this 7-year period. At the time of the abomination of desolation, the Jews who have chosen to live, to stay in Judea, they're going to choose it because they believe God wants them to hold on to their promised land. When that event happens, it's going to ignite Palestinian anger. The Palestinians are going to begin to slaughter them, and they're going to have to run for their life. Now, when this prophecy was given 2,000 years ago, there were Jews living in Judea. However, they were all driven out by the Romans. They were banished from living in the nation of Israel. The Jews have been filtered through the nations of the world since that time, and only recently have gone back to their promised land, the nation of Israel being reborn in 1948. However, when the nation of Israel was reborn in 1948, the Jordanians launched a war against Israel, along with the Syrians, along with the Iraqis, along with the Egyptians, along with the Jordanians. They launched a war against the new nation of Israel, and they drove all of the Jews out of Judea, Samaria. So from 1948 until 1967, 0 Jews living in Judea and Samaria. And yet this prophecy in the Bible given by Jesus states that during this final 7-year period, during the first 3.5, there are going to be Jews living in Judea. So what happened? Well, when the 67 war broke out, Egypt, Syria, Jordan all attacked Israel. Israel counterattacked Jordan and drove all the way to the Jordan River, capturing Judea, Samaria. Now, there were 0 Jews in there prior to 67. However, God said, when I bring you into the promised land that I promised to you through your father Abraham, you are to occupy the land. So Jews began to move out there. And every place they found vacant land, they would build homes until those homes become settlements, and those settlements became cities. Today, there are 650,000 Jews living in the area of Judea, Samaria. Okay. Now, Jesus said that those Jews being in Judea are going to have to run for their life. Why? Right now, the Israeli military is in charge there. But negotiations are all ongoing between the Palestinians and the Israelis, headed by John Kerry, our Secretary of State, and they set a goal to have an agreement by April the 29th of this year. Will they make it by that exact day? I do not know, but they're going to make it. They are going to have a peace agreement, whether it's this year or next year or the next year. But it looks like to me it's likely to be this year. Now, if they make it, then this prophecy I just read to you is 3.5 years after April the 29th, which means 3 years and 9 months from today. The Jews of Judea are going to have to run for their lives. Now, that's what Jesus said. Okay, but it's been assumed that when this peace agreement is signed, all the Jews will leave Judea. Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinians, says not one Jew will be left there. He said that a time or two. And yet the Bible very clearly states that there will be Jews in Judea halfway through this 7-year period. After the agreement, 3.5 years later, there's still Jews living out there. Okay, how's this all going to come down? Well, let me tell you, the headlines of the Jerusalem Post, of the Israel National News, of the Haaretz newspaper, they're all talking about it today. Here it is. This one comes from Israel National News, and it was the 26th, so 2 days ago. It's titled, Netanyahu Floats Idea, Settlers to Live Under Palestinian Authority Rule. A source in the Prime Minister's office told reporters Sunday that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes that if a Palestinian state is established in Judea, Samaria, Jews who wish to remain in that state should be allowed to do so. The source said that Netanyahu believes that there is no reason for the Palestinian state, if it is created, to be mono-ethnic, meaning of only one nationality. The source explained that the idea is a continuation of Netanyahu's statement in his speech at Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum on Friday, in which he made clear that he does not intend to evict Jews from any communities in Judea, Samaria. Now, a little bit of a reminder here. Remember back in 2005, when Ariel Sharon said, we've got to pull out of Gaza. So he passed an order that all the Jews had to leave. Some of them had been living there for 40, 50 years, houses they had built with their own hands. But Sharon said, we're not going to be able to keep this land. We're trying to get a peace deal. Therefore, you've got to go. The Jewish people said, no, we're not going. So Sharon sent the soldiers in. They picked their Jewish brethren up, kicking and screaming and weeping, and carried them away from their homes. It was a horrible experience. Some of the Jews carrying their fellow Jews out were weeping along with the people they were carrying. But nevertheless, they carried them out. Well, Netanyahu says, I'm not doing that again. I know I'm approaching the time when very painful and difficult decisions have to be made to evacuate the settlers from Judea, Samaria. But I'm not carrying them out. We will pay them reparations if they leave willingly. But if they don't want to leave, then they can stay right there living. It'll be their choice, living as a Jewish minority under a Palestinian state. After all, there are 1.6 million Arabs living in Israel under the Israeli government, so why couldn't there be Jews living under a Palestinian government? Now, that's the logic. Okay, and that's what this article is all about. The last paragraph of this particular article said Netanyahu's plan is unlikely to be accepted by Palestinian Authority head Mahmoud Abbas in any case, since Abbas has vowed not to allow a single Jew to live in Palestine. Now that's what he said one time. But listen to what he said another time. This next article comes from the Jerusalem Post just today. It's entitled, Yakimovich, who is the head of the Labor Party until recently. Abbas agreed to Jewish settlers to in a future Palestinian state. Here's the first paragraph. Labor leader Shelley Yakimovich claimed on Tuesday morning that she had discussed the possibility of Jewish settlers who did not wish to leave their West Bank communities staying in a Palestinian state as citizens. Yakimovich stated on Israel radio that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas had accepted the proposal in a meeting between herself and Abbas in May of 2013, about 9 months ago or so. Yakimovich was responding to strong opposition from right-wing parties in the government as well as certain elements on the left to comments made by an official in Netanyahu's office that the prime minister believes the residents of Judea, Samaria should be allowed to remain in a Palestinian state. And even though Abbas says, that'll never happen, and yet Yakimovich, the head of the Labor Party, says, I talked to him in May of last year, and he said that that was okay, that could be done. Okay. Another article about this. I told you there's a bunch of them. This is the buzz in all the news in Israel in the last 2 or 3 days. Now, remember, the prophecy was given 2,000 years ago. But the discussion of Jews being left under a Palestinian rule is just happening right now, 2,000 years later. And Jesus said, when they stay under Palestinian rule, halfway into the arrangement, something's going to happen, and they're going to have to run for their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, you and I have launched a project to make sure they're warned, that they know this is coming. This is a New Testament prophecy. They're Jewish. Most of them don't believe in the New Testament. However, by God's grace, you and I are going to warn them so that if they will listen, not one of them will perish. But if they don't listen, they're going to be slaughtered. You've already been contributing. I thank you for it. When we get back, I'll tell you how you can continue.